Now that we know where each chord starts and how long we should hold each chord for, let's figure out what notes we're actually going to give to the pianist. And I think the easiest way to do that is just to use the simple piano voicing that we learned a couple of videos back. And remember, we're going to put the root, the third, and the fifth in the right hand, and then the octave doubling of the root in the left hand. So let's start out with our C major chord right here at the beginning. What are we going to give the pianist to play? Well, let's start with giving the root, the third, and the fifth in the right hand. So here we go. The root is C. The third is E. And the fifth is G. There we go. And I'm just going to write these out as note heads without a stem for the moment, because we're going to add the rhythm in just a moment, but I just want us to visually see the chord. So C, E, G in the left hand. I'm sorry, in the right hand. Now in the left hand, we're going to double the root. So we'll have, the root is the C, so we'll put the C the octave below, and then the C one octave below that. So we have the two roots doubled in the left hand. There we go. So how long are we going to hold this chord out for? Well, let's go back up to what we figured out up here. We figured out that the C major chord, we're going to have to hold that for 4 beats. Well, what rhythmic value is 4 beats long? Well, the whole note, right? Whole note is 4 beats. But here's the problem. We're in 2/4 time. So if we put a whole note in a measure of 2/4, remember a measure of 2/4 only has 2 beats, now we have too many beats in this measure. We have a whole note which has 4 beats, and we've tried to squeeze it into a measure that has only 2 beats. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to use the ties that we've learned. Remember the ties that keep the sound of a note going over a bar line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write my C major chord right here. I'm going to write it for the maximum possible value that I can in 2/4, which is for 2 beats. So I'm going to write it as a half note. And then I'm going to tie that over, since we still need 2 beats, I'm going to tie that over to another half note in the second measure like this. So remember, those ties mean that I'm not going to restart this chord in the second measure. I'm just going to keep that sound holding. So I have beats. I have 1, 2 beats here, and then 3 and 4 beats here. 1, 2, 3, 4, which is exactly what we figured out we needed at the top for the C major chord. Okay, so for simplicity's sake, let's just keep the bass. Let's keep the bass clef line, the left-hand line, the same. Here we go. So I'm going to do a half note in the bass clef, and then another half note in the bass clef, and then I connect those. There we go. So if I were to perform this accompaniment all by itself in the first 2 measures, I would go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And there I go. I've held my C major chord for 2 beats. Let's go on to measure 3. We need an F major chord, and we need that to be held for how many beats? 2 beats. So what does that mean we need? We need a half note, because a half note gets 2 beats. So I'm going to write my voicing of root third fifth, or in an F major chord, F, A, C, as a half note in the right hand, and then do the octave doubling of the root, F, and F in the left hand, and write that as a half note as well. Same thing when I go over to the 4th measure. We have a C major chord, and we need that to be held for 2 beats. What rhythmic value gives us 2 beats? A half note. So I'm going to write my C major chord, C, E, G, root third fifth as a half note. And the same thing in the left hand. I'm going to double my root, C and C, right here. Again, as a half note. So, what do we have next? In measure 5, we need a G. And again, the G is going to be held for 2 beats, so that's going to be another half note. Half note gets 2 beats. And my root of the G major chord is G. Third is B. The fifth is D, so G, B, D, and I'm going to write that as a half note. Same thing in the left hand. Root and root in octaves, so 2 Gs in octaves. Down here. Measure 6. Another C major chord for how many beats? 2 beats. So I'm going to write that as C, E, G, root third fifth as a half note, and then root and root. We've seen this chord a bunch of times so far. There we go. And in measure 7, oh, here's where things get interesting, because we need the D minor chord for 1 beat and then the G major chord for 1 beat. So what rhythmic value gives us 1 beat? Well, we're going to need to write a quarter note. So the D minor, root third fifth, D, F, A, and since we need that to happen for 1 beat, we're going to write that as a quarter note, and then we're going to add the root doubled in the left hand, D and D, as a quarter note. Then we have a G major chord in the second beat, so we need G, B, D, root third fifth. And of course, we're going to write that as a quarter note because we need that for 1 beat. And I'll do the same thing in the left hand. And then finally, in the very last measure, we need yet another C major chord, yet another half note, because that last C major chord is going to be held for 2 beats. Root, third, fifth, and root in the bottom. Let me play this entire accompaniment now from beginning to end, and I'll just play the piano part. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It's not brilliant, it's not the most amazing music you've ever heard, but that's a perfectly serviceable accompaniment for Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And remember, since all these 3 staves are happening at the same time, the staff that has the melody, the staff that has the right-hand music for the piano, and the staff that has the left-hand music for the piano, everything that is happening, everything that is aligned vertically, up and down, is happening at exactly the same time. So we have 3 different musical things happening here. On the first beat of measure 1, we have the first syllable of twinkle on that C in the voice. We have the root third fifth chord in the right hand of the piano, and then we have the doubled root in the left hand of the piano. So now I'm going to put this all together, and I'm going to sing this rendition of it with accompaniment. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Again, that is not the most brilliant music you've ever heard, but that is a perfectly serviceable accompaniment. That is a perfectly workable realization of a lead sheet. In the next video, we're going to just check out a couple of other things that we could do to make this even a little bit more interesting.